Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the November 12th, 2019 regular meeting of council to order at 7 p.m. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. So item 2.1, regular council meeting agenda for November 12th. Wow. For item 2.1, I'd like to advise that we have received correspondence late this afternoon from the Victoria Residential Builders Association related to item 7.5 of the agenda, BC Energy Step Code Process, Consultation and Implementation of the council agenda. I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended to include this letter for council's consideration. Second, Councillor Jensen, seconder. Councillor Parkinson. Any discussion on this? Okay. Call the question. All in favor? Unanimous? Opposed? Okay, at this point in time, I would invite the public for public participation. Invite anyone to present, to take the opportunity to address council, to present concerns or ask questions of council. I just want to remind everyone that council cannot receive comments on matters where a public hearing has been held until the bylaw regarding the matter has been adopted. There's going to be 20 minutes allotted for public participation period. Topics should be addressed briefly to allow speakers, other speakers, the opportunity to address council. And again, just like to remind the public when they come forward when you come forward to speak, to please state your name and address for the record. So anyone from the public? Okay. That's easy. Seeing none, I will continue with item 4, Mayor's message. I have a few messages from the Mayor who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. Sorry for looking at you this way. If I look through the glasses, it's a big blur. So, but the Mayor is incapacitated tonight, so he asked me to step in as acting Mayor. First of all, I just want to state that everyone here at Council were honored to attend the Remembrance Day ceremonies in and around Colwood. We had representatives at the Wonderland Cenotaph, Royal Roads University, and of course up at Veterans Memorial Park. So every one of us was there representing council. And a special thanks to Councillors Jensen, Kobayashi, that's me, Logan, and Parkinson. On Sunday, we gave a little TLC, tender loving care, to the cenotaph down at Wonderland. It certainly needed it. Unfortunately, not everything we couldn't get everything done. We didn't have a flag, and it was unfortunate. The flag was a little bit tattered, but you know, we worked on Sunday afternoon. It was a little bit of team building for us, and if it wasn't for the leadership of Councillor Jensen, I'm going to give him full credit for this, and he got us all off our chairs and watching football, and we went and cleaned the cenotaph, and we actually it looked absolutely beautiful. It was gorgeous. And so just like to thank every member for getting out to the Remembrance Day ceremonies and for the special work done down at the Wonderland Cenotaph. Please keep an eye out for the beautiful new street banners going up around Colwood. It showcases the artwork of Colwood artists. They bring a lot of beauty of Colwood's natural areas onto the streets. And again, a thank you to our communications manager, Sandra. Russell, of course, behind all this, and great job. Thank you very much, Sandra. Mark December 5th on your calendar. You don't want to miss the Colwood Christmas Light Up. It starts at 6 p.m. with music by local school choirs, hot chocolates and treats, and hot dogs, and a visit from Santa. Great shout out to all the local businesses who are sponsoring this for us. So it's just a great, it grows every year, and I've seen it. I think I was on the original when I used to own a sandwich shop. We used to provide all the hot chocolate, and I've seen it grow over the years, so it's just absolutely fantastic. If you haven't checked out the new Let's Talk Colwood site, please do. We want to hear your thoughts and ideas about all that is going on in Colwood. And I will be, personally, I will advise at this time, I will be pushing forward a resolution in the near future at council for some funding to ensure our Colwood cenotaph is maintained properly, and some of the work, and there are grants, federal grants that we can get to look after our cenotaph and look after it a lot better. Just take this opportunity, any members from council like to say anything at this point in time to add to this? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. So item 5.1, the regular council meetings from October 28th, 2019. Ask for a motion to adopt the minutes from the October 28th, 2019 regular meeting of council. Okay, Councillor Jensen, seconder. Councillor Baxter. Right. Yep. Any discussion? Councillor Day.
I just want to speak a little bit in terms of the minutes do not reflect all of the comments that were made around the table, and also the video is not available to the public on the website. So I understand there's some changes being made with the website that has made that video just not available at this time, but I think that it's important that the public is able to see what council is doing, and that is not available at this time.
Selena, do you have anything to address this right now? Nothing?
Staff is in the process of implementing a new live streaming meeting webcast service, and there was an interruption on the previous council meeting, and unfortunately we did not get the video. We do have the audio, and we'll have that uploaded. Again, changing service providers, access has become an issue for us as well, but we will get that up as soon as we possibly can. With respect to anything missing in the minutes, I would be, willing to respond to specifics on that.
So comments that were made by members of council regarding the letter of apology from me are not recorded.
That's correct. The minutes reflect the actions or the decisions of council. Earlier this year in January, the city stopped producing verbatim minutes and went to action-oriented minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, Committee of the Whole, item 5.2, Committee of the Whole, October 21st, 2019. To ask for a motion on council to receive the minutes of the October 21st, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting. So moved. Councillor Baxter, seconder. Councillor Logan. Any discussion? Okay. Call the question. All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, we're on to presentations, and we're honored this evening to receive a presentation from the Colwood Garden Society, the Community Garden Project Update. And I'd like to invite Barbara Sibold from the Community Garden Society to the podium to provide her update to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting Mayor Kobayashi and council members, for allowing us to come this evening and speak to you. I'm here to give you an update on the progress of the Colwood Community Garden, its results so far, and a request for your continued support of its growth based on citizen interest. I'm asking for your support, but not any financial commitment. We are a self-funding group, passionate about growing local food. The Colwood Garden Society was created in 2014 for the purpose of providing the space to work with people to grow more food in the region and help individuals and families become active in growing, sharing, buying, and eating local foods. With this vision in mind, the Garden Society, with many volunteers, built and now maintain the Colwood Community Garden. The previous council, led by Carol Hamilton, fully supported the Garden Society and Community Garden. I have great faith that the current council is of the same mind. Members of the Colwood Garden Society are volunteers, residents of West Shore, urban farmers, students, homemakers, working moms and dads, singles of all ages, and children. Some of us are very affluent. Some live well under the poverty line. Many were born in countries other than Canada, and some struggle with learning English. Most of us had never seen each other until we came together in the spring of 2018 to finally dig our first gardens. But we all had a common goal. We wanted to improve our accessibility to healthy, fresh produce and to share our knowledge and experiences in order to help others with the same desires. We've gone from bare ground to a few handful of active plots last summer to 28 raised garden beds for local families this summer. We had fresh vegetables, berries, even some exotic things like Italian zucchini and bok choy. We've planted 4 fruit trees for the future. Wishart Elementary School uses 2 extra large plots and the whole garden space as well as an outdoor classroom. Their gardens were overflowing this fall with potatoes for French fries, sunflowers for toasted seeds, and pumpkins for pumpkin pies. In the spring, classes of children often came out to the garden to find a special place where they could sit quietly and for their reading time or for figuring out their math problems. Teachers have observed the behavior and anxiety issues that students may exhibit in the classroom disappear when they enter the garden. 2 other extra large plots are allocated to the Living Edge Market, a free market-style distribution center for the disenfranchised residents of Western communities. It's held on Friday mornings throughout the year. This summer, we delivered fresh local produce to Living Edge weekly from mid-June to mid-September. These gardens were cared for by the Colwood Garden Society volunteers, seeding, watering, harvesting, and delivering produce every week. There's a great need for community gardens in the West Shore. Colwood Community Garden is the only publicly available community garden in Colwood or Langford. We have a waiting list of 15. The few other community gardens we see are privately owned and for a specific group, such as school-related or owned by a strata or for members of a particular condo building. As our communities become more built up, local healthy food will become scarcer, and we will depend more on food delivered from further locales. We would like to expand the garden to include 16 more plots, a small shed for tools, and wheelchair access. I ask all of you to continue with your support of the Colwood Garden Society and our community gardens, both present and future. It offers our citizens healthy local food, builds community, supports learning, and gives healthy food to those in need through Living Edge. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, Barbara. Very articulate. Thank you. Any questions from council to Barbara? Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 7, new business. Under new business 7.1, the 2020 budget approach. It was a recommendation from the October 21st, 2019 Committee of the Whole. The recommendation is that the 2020 budget approach be endorsed. And can I have a mover and a seconder for the staff recommendation? Councillor Baxter? Councillor Day. Any discussion? Councillor Parkinson.
I guess I'd like some clarification perhaps from the CAO on a few things. I believe that the budget timeline is realistic and good, but as we went through the budget this year, and for some of us it was our first time, and we struggled a bit. And I think there's maybe some foundational information that we should wrap our heads around and agree on before we finalize a budget. Things like the sustainable infrastructure, where we talked about setting aside funds for 100% replacement in the future, and is that the path we want to go down? I know we did it last year, or we did it on a one-year basis. The concept of when a debt is repaid, to continue to charge the same payments to people to fund future infrastructure, is that the path we want to go down? New construction revenue, the appropriate usages of that. And we also, I think, need to have a discussion on the ratio of tax rates between the residential, commercial, and industrial things. So, I'd like to guess, I'd like to have some assurance that we're going to wrap our heads around those items to help build a better budget.
CEO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, in advance of the tax rate bylaw coming back before Council, it was administration's plan to bring forward policy options with respect to our sustainable infrastructure funding approach, specific transfers to reserve approach. That would include the concept of debt retirement as described. We would also bring to Council policy options with respect to tax rates and tax ratios. The third item with respect to new tax revenue was not on our list, but we can certainly add it to our list and bring that information to you again in advance of asking you to once again set tax rates for the following year.
Thank you very much. Councilor Parkinson? Yeah? No?
I guess I just have one question here on the parks maintenance. There's a number for $200,000, and I'm just not sure. It says under the comment, it says February 4th, Committee of the Whole, Royal Bay. February 4th was a meeting we talked about the levels of service for park maintenance and the 16.5 FTEs, and was that the right number, and how does that relate to overall staffing and staffing for public works? The $200,000 number, if I don't think we talked about, and I believe that might have been something talked about by a previous council, so I'm just not clear on that number, and I wonder if anybody has any recollection.
Councilor Baxter?
I'd like to speak to that too. I recall that meeting, and we were informed at the time that the numbers of parks employees being discussed were existing numbers involved in parks maintenance, not a proposed number. And I actually questioned that in that meeting because I didn't feel, given my experience, that that was an actual number, but rather a proposal. The fact that the $200,000 is turned up in the budget would seem to indicate that it was in fact a proposal, and that that number, to get to that proposed number, has now been added into the draft budget, and I'm sure that Chris Payne, our finance director, has more information on that he'd be willing to share with the CIO, as I don't believe you were there for that meeting.
CEO, please.
Thank you again, Your Worship. You're certainly right, I wasn't there. My expectation is this number likely relates to new costs relative to new park acquisitions with the development of Royal Bay. It will be staff's intention to move forward with a zero-based budgeting approach, such that we will build up budgets based on our understanding of the need for service that you describe in terms of your expectations of service. And so we will not, if 200,000 is the number, we will build that up from the base, indicating here's the size of the park, here's the number of hours needed for the specific required service multiplied across by all parks. And so I'm not sure what the number will be. My expectation is the 200,000 that's in this report here was an estimation by staff at that time relative to additional costs, relative to additional park services.
Thank you for that.
Councilor Parkinson?
Okay, so I don't know. I don't know where the number came from, but I'm perhaps looking to Councillor Day or Councillor Logan. I think there was, in the previous council, there was discussion of increased costs for park maintenance for Meadow Park in Royal Bay. Maybe it looks like the Director of Engineering and Development knows something about that. I think that's the number. I just don't think, so I think that comes from a different meeting than the February 4th. It comes from previous. And I think there's also a timeline on when that park gets turned over and when the city assumes the maintenance. So that's kind of what I think it is, and it's not related to the level of service of parks that we talked about. So I'm confused. I'd like some clarity.
Brett, do you have any comments on that?
So at the time, in February, I believe it is, or perhaps Councillor Parkinson is correct that it was earlier than that, before we took on the Meadow Park North works, the Landscape Society produces a book which talks about the anticipated maintenance required for the park space. At the time, we'd only absorbed into the city as asset about a third of the park. So the number that you may be seeing is in draft format. However, we've acknowledged that we do need funds put aside for the park maintenance down there. I think that as our CEO has advised, that we're going to tighten up on those numbers in the coming year. And then any number you see there is an intention to put aside, because we know that about 1/3 of the park is built. I believe that the total cost was around $500,000 actually. But that the 1/3 of the cost of the park is built. We expect to take on another third this year or early next. And so we plan to be working through 2020 and 21 and beyond, frankly, to keep our level of service numbers tight and bring them back to council for consideration. So I would consider it a line item. If necessary, I can recirculate that base report from that time period to refresh it. It's not all on the top of my head, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I do recall that there was an extensive report done on the level of service in Public Works, looking at both parks and other issues for Public Works. So it probably would be a good idea for us to pull that back up again and maybe relook at what our expectations are and where we're headed, so that everybody is kind of on the same page, because there has been an awful lot of change. There's been a lot of new parks coming on board, and there has also been a lot of reorganization within the city of Colwood. So I think to get everybody on the same page, we need to start with what are the facts we've got, and where are we heading with this, so that council can be fully informed when they're making their budget decisions going forward.
Brent, from that head nodding, I take it you can do this then.
This is something that this Chief Administrative Officer and myself have been talking about, and we plan to bring back, as Robert has indicated, a full spectrum analysis for cost and implications that aren't just based on the landscape architects, but our ability to serve as ground up, as he indicated.
Okay, thank you very much. So on that note, any other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. 7.2, 3159 Antrobus Crescent, License of Occupation Agreement. This is a recommendation from the November 4th, 2019 Committee of the Whole. I'm going to present the staff recommendation and ask for a mover and seconder. The recommendation is that a license of occupation agreement be approved for the owners of 3159 Antrobus Crescent for landscape improvements within the city boulevard.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Loken, and seconder is Councillor Jensen. Discussion. Councillor Day.
Thank you. At the Committee of the Whole, I asked a number of questions, particularly whether or not there is a bylaw that refers to this. I have found the bylaw. It's number 50 in the consolidated bylaws. And that bylaw states that it is only, the permits are only permitted through the engineer. And that is the wording that is in our bylaw. And also recently, we received a letter in our correspondence file about a different property where that permit process has been concerning for another neighbor who's impacted by it. So I'm very concerned that when I asked about boulevards in Colwood and whether or not this was a new policy wherein all the residents of Colwood are going to be expected to have permits or agreements for maintaining their boulevards, the response was that we weren't going to go back and try to legitimize everything that had been done in the past. I'm very concerned that this process is happening without any public input and without really your neighbors can be very impacted by something and not have any process where their concerns are taken into consideration. So approving this tonight has the effect of impacting residents who have no way of knowing that they're being impacted. The bylaw has the authority to create a permit, but it doesn't have any process that goes with that to inform the public. So that means that some residents are being treated differently, so that there isn't really that basic premise of equality when we carry out this having some people do a permit based on a staff member, not an engineer, having driven around and decided that this one does and maybe that one doesn't need a permit. So I really think that the city needs to rethink the process to ensure that there is fairness and equality for everyone in Colwood. And you know, there's so many modifications, which many of them are great. This particular one also I think is great. Other members of council spoke to how well it is received by the neighborhood, but we can't do that without being respectful of all voices in Colwood and make sure that people are treated fairly. So it is the tip of the iceberg in many ways, and I think that the process needs to take a step back and sort itself out.
Okay. Councillor Baxter.
As I said in response at the last meeting at which this was discussed, the process of permitting and providing licenses of occupation or similar instruments to people doing works on the boulevard has been going on for decades, and the tip of the iceberg was a very long time ago and has been happening during several councils over those decades, and I don't see that it's become a problem at any point, and I see no reason why this particular one of so many would create a problem for the future.
Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm entirely comfortable with this. I think this has come forward in a logical manner. It makes sense to me. I've read through the agreement. It seems that these people are more than willing to enter into an agreement for their boulevard, which is what we've asked. And let's conclude this discussion and enter into this arrangement. And it is some lovely works, and we'll deal with these as they come forward. If there is an administrative process that might accelerate this, great. But I don't think this is a panacea or opening Pandora's box. I see this as a one-off.
Any other discussion? Councillor Parkinson?
I'm not unsympathetic to Councillor Day's concerns about public, public should get a chance to comment on things. And I also wonder at what level we encourage, we're not going to send letters out to 75-meter radius for a very minor change to a boulevard, which I would kind of consider this one. So while I certainly, I would hope that neighbors who thought they were affected would know they could come to City Hall and speak to this, I don't think I'm in favor of creating more process around minor items, to be frank. So,
Councillor Day?
Thank you. My concern is not with this particular application, but the fact that these people are being asked to do something and pay costs that other people are not being asked to do. It is discouraging people who would like to improve their boulevard because of additional costs and burdens that are being put on them, and there is no fair process whereby there is a level playing field. This person's boulevard improvements are requiring this agreement. This person's boulevard improvements are being completely ignored, and they're not being required to have an agreement. So my problem is that people aren't being treated equally.
I'm going to go to staff for comment on this, please.
Councillor Day is correct that Bylaw 50, or established already a long time ago, establishes the right to obtain permits and fees and it requests engineering approval. Frankly, the engineering approval is divested through the organization, so it's done by all manners of parties within the engineering department, equally. The discretion on to who approves it is ultimately to the city engineers-elect, and we work very, very hard, as I indicated, to preserve the intent of the boulevard for the will of council, which is as established to create bikeways, pedestrian ways, boulevard improvements. Most applicants do not wish to install works on municipal lands. It's not their property, and so therefore they don't wish to install works on other people's lands and then run the risk of it being removed. As indicated, it is not willy-nilly. Staff work with the proponents to be able to isolate and identify where property borders are so that people can keep their works and improvements on their own lands. And yes, Bylaw 50 does allow for the city to ask for residents to assist the city in looking after their boulevard portions. This particular aspect has come out, as implied at the committee of the whole meeting, because of the level of surface and hard infrastructure that's been installed. Plants and improvements would not require a letter of undertaking. We would work into clear and indicated roles with those peoples that if the city needed to relocate those works, that we would. However, because of the cost and the magnitude that was undertaken to install these works as hard surface works, they deserve to have council consideration of the matter, and by opening it up to a matter of committee of the whole and then council, you are in fact inviting the public to speak to it. There is no notification radius required under the community charter. The fact that it's been vetted by council is appropriate to allow for the public to speak and allow their concerns to be voiced. If council chooses not to enter into the license agreement, that is their elect, and as such, it would be respected. However, this is that forum for that public engagement to enable it to happen, whether and if it is desired or wished. And council can also choose to request a policy to help harden these up. However, I need to indicate that plant materials wouldn't normally necessitate this unless there was thousands of dollars installed in a high vestitude by those residences.
Thank you very much, Brent. I'll give you one last kick at the can.
I just want to point out that my problem is not with the application that's in front of us, but with the numbers of properties that are not required to go through this process, who have rocks and gravel and obstructions, and it's very ad hoc how these are coming forward to council.
At this point in time, I'm going to call the question. The motion is that a license of occupation agreement be approved for the owners of 3159 Antrobus Crescent for landscapes improvement within the city boulevard. All those in favor? All opposed? So Councillor Day is opposed. Okay, item 7.3, Winter Wonderland lighting display. I almost want to break out into song here, Winter Wonderland. I'd like to invite Sandra Russell, our Corporate Communications Manager, to the podium to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this came about in 2017 when Councillor Martin, when he was a councillor, suggested the idea of a Winter Wonderland display in Meadow Park as a way to promote the new Royal Bay community and invite residents to come out and celebrate together and to involve local businesses through sponsorship. It was never a council decision at that time, so that's why it's coming forward now. What staff did do following that request was ensure that Meadow Park had electrical outlets, because at that time it didn't have. So the light standards in Meadow Park now have electrical outlets. And in 2018, staff saw that our unique Star and Castle decorative holiday lights were installed throughout Meadow Park. So a few steps have been taken toward this sort of initiative. The other thing we do, of course, is the Colwood Christmas Light Up that you mentioned, Councillor Kobayashi. So the idea would be that this would extend those holiday celebrations throughout the season for residents. So what's proposed in this report is sort of a phased approach to a holiday lighting display. Option one would be to, in the 2019-2020 season, start with just some decorated trees in a local park. Approximately $5,000 would be allocated to this from existing budgets to invite a lighting display company to come and create sort of a walkway through a park to start this. We could also energize that event with specific dates, hot chocolate and caroling in the park, just to bring some life to that event. Option two then would be to expand the display over the coming years. And this was an example that Councillor Mayor Martin had drawn on, which is in Airdrie, Alberta. And so the idea is to have ground-oriented, quality, pre-lit displays that businesses could be invited to sponsor on various levels so that the cost could be recouped, and also to involve businesses in the displays. The suggestion would be that Colwood's theme would be very natural, to draw on Colwood's beautiful natural amenities, and less commercial, less religious, but just a natural sort of display that we would grow year to year. And also, as sponsorships increased, recover the costs of the initial outlay for the displays themselves. This is just an example. The mayor had suggested that we put together a nice polished website that would offer different levels for sponsorship and make it a really organized presentation. This is what Airdrie's looks like, and we could certainly do that with ease on our website. So 4 different parks have been suggested if council wanted to proceed with the 2019-2020 initial lighted display. This is Meadow Park in Royal Bay. So some of the features of this park are that it has a nice natural walkway that would lend itself to this kind of a display. What it doesn't have is a lot of existing trees for natural decoration at this point. And if the intention was in this year to decorate existing trees and structures, that's limited in this park. It does have great visibility for passersby. It's got security because Royal Bay has a security attendant on duty. Homes are more and more adjacent to the park, so considerations around lighting and noise and activity would need to be considered. Meadow Park. The second park for consideration would be Harmonious Park on Kelly Road. It also has a really nice natural walkway. It's also got existing trees that could easily be sort of wrapped in lights and decorated that way. It also has the pergolas for event space, which could be helpful, and good visibility from Kelly Road. less secure potentially, less eyes on it, and it's in a well-trafficked area. So those are the kind of considerations for that park. Another suggestion was Wickham Park, which is on Machosen Road next to Lagoon Market and Royal Bay Bakery. Lots of existing trees. It's got not a pathway, but a nice existing walk through it. Lots of eyes on it, so people just passing by would benefit from the display, as well as people who came to the sort of scheduled event or to actually walk through. And the other idea would be right here at City Hall. And we do have this really neat sort of unique circular area that people don't use very much that might make a really nice sort of lit display that we could work with. We do have challenges sometimes at Christmas time with the Christmas light up and all the lights that are happening. The electricity is sometimes a challenge, and so that we would need to deal with things like that. So those are the options. The third option, of course, would be not to proceed at all with any expanded holiday lighting. And I think I'll turn it over to council for discussion at that point.
Thank you very much, Sandra.
You're welcome.
Any questions from council to Sandra? Councillor Parkinson?
I'm just wondering how firm the numbers are. Have you got quotes for anything, or are we confident in the numbers you're presenting?
Yes, in the $5,000 for initial display, that would be, yes, we would stick with that limit for this year. Yeah.
I just have one question to you. So will you be choosing which park it's going to be in?
Well, I was hoping for your advice on that tonight.
Oh, well, I guess this is what I hear as feedback right now. Of course, I love Meadow Park mainly because I live close to it, right? But then everything seems to be there, right? It seems to be centric around there. So I'm actually hearing some backlash, but, Colwood's bigger than that. So I just want that to be considered, I guess is what I'm just trying to bring out. I don't have a solution for you.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot to mention that there would be some benefit to doing this in an established neighborhood with long-term residents who maybe don't as often see new amenities the way Royal Bay residents are right now.
Okay. Councillor Day?
I just wondered if, when you were evaluating the sites, is there any site that, I guess I'm thinking that you have to divide your money between the infrastructure to put the lights on and the lights themselves. So is there one that would allow for more lights and less investment in infrastructure?
Yes, and for this year, that's the intention, that we wouldn't be investing in the ground-oriented displays, and we would just be decorating the natural infrastructure. So I would say that Wickham Park or Herm Williams Park offer the best opportunities for that. City Hall as well, but it doesn't offer that benefit to passers-by as much. It would be quite closed in. I hope that helps.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's actually nothing to say that we couldn't do both if we really wanted to invest. But I really like Meadow Park in that it's that park is already a hub for Halloween and Easter. But when you're looking at 5-10 years out, that park and this display will expand. And actually, it's going to be a pretty darn funky linear type of display that will go, from Latoria Boulevard almost up to Wishart, and it will have quite an effect. And when you think about the commons developing and that area becoming lively, it will be a spectacle. And so I think that's probably the best location if you want to see growth of the display and excitement, I suppose. And I do agree with Herm Williams as well. I mean, that's a nice family park, but of course the ability to expand is limited as well. So my preference would be Meadow.
Councillor Baxter?
I think another thing we have to think about in regards to infrastructure is if there's going to be hot chocolate and, partying there, then we're going to need parking. And you know, for instance, Herm Williams, the parking's pretty limited there, and it's pretty near the main road, or a busy road anyway. Meadow Park does have some advantages in that way. But is there any electrical infrastructure in Meadow Park at all, or would it all have to be created new?
There are electrical outlets in the light standards of Meadow Park now. Yeah.
Okay, so that gives us a running start.
Yep.
Okay.
Everyone gets a turn first, of course. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the idea of Herm William Park, but I think I see the advantages the other way from. But this smells a lot like winter eats and beats. I'm just saying.
You stole my line.
Oh, sorry. Once again, Michael?
We'll have to wear elf tights.
If you mean award-winning, then yes.
So thanks. My vote, after hearing this discussion and hearing the concern from the chair, I thought Herm William Park, I think I would personally strike that other park off the list for reasons of wheelchair accessibility and seniors and stuff like that. But I think the advantages of, unfortunately, the advantages of Royal Bay outweigh the other one, in my opinion. Thank you, Sandra.
Councillor Parkinson.
I'm wondering, the displays wouldn't have to go back to the same park every year, would they? I mean, once they're there and they get picked up, they're stored somewhere and could go to a different park in years to come?
Not necessarily. Yeah, that's true. This year, if we were just decorating trees, we certainly could take those lights down and do a different park next year.
So we shouldn't get swayed too much by Gordy's vision of this winter wonderland from Machosen all the way through to View Royal.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, as I'm thinking about all the comments here, and certainly accessibility, I think, is really important. And one of our most accessible parks didn't make your short list, so I'm wondering about Colwood Creek Park.
And the reason it didn't make the short list is only because it's less visible than the others. There's no, a limited number of passersby who would be attracted in just by seeing
Okay.
the park.
Yeah, I feel quite torn by the locations, and I do really think that accessibility is really important. I know that for as long as we've been doing the Christmas light up here, we've had lots of kids and lots of families, and we get pretty big clumps of people. And one of the big attractions with our city hall is that it's beautiful outside, but when everybody gets cold, they really love being able to come in and get warmed up and have some crafts and things here. So if we choose a location other than City Hall will still have the same light up we've always had.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty torn, but the Herm Williams Park does have the benefit of having a pretty good accessible pathway throughout it. And even though it's not marked out all that well, there is quite a bit of street parking on 80 and behind. There's kind of, a whole blocks of areas where people could park. And it's also been identified as a very dark area in Colwood, recommended for some lighting improvements. So having the Christmas lights there might really liven up what's become a bit of a dark area in the winter.
If I may, another consideration about parking is the intention of this would be it's just a drop by, and we may have hot chocolate and music on specific nights, but for the most part it would be people just wandering by, taking the family on a Tuesday night when they have nothing to do, that sort of thing too. So just to consider that.
Any more questions directly to Sandra? I'll let her sit down and talk about the motion.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Sandra. So the staff recommendation, and I'll be asking for a mover and seconder, is that council direct staff to proceed with phase 1, and I would assume that's the $5,000 maximum limits expenditure of a multi-year plan to create a winter wonderland holiday light display in Colwood.
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Jensen,
Second.
Councillor Logan seconds. Discussion, further discussion. Councillor Baxter.
We don't have to often talk about one of our goals being happiness, and I think we should talk about it more, but I like this proposal because it makes people happy. They like this kind of thing. And especially the hot chocolate and having a good time on a particular day would be a good way to start it off. And I actually have written in my notes, this is eats and beats in toques and mittens. But I must say that I'm wrestling with the location, and I think that's the biggest thing you need from us. I think it should definitely not be at City Hall, because we need to move into new areas. I hope everybody will agree with that. I like the idea of Herm Williams because, as communications manager stated, it is a dark area. It's wonderful in the summer because it's cool, but in the winter it's less attractive, and this would bring an attraction to it. But I also like the idea of Meadow Park to celebrate our new area, but I don't want the other areas to feel forgotten. And of all the ones suggested, I think that Herm Williams is the furthest from the existing display at City Hall, and therefore gives more people, more existing residents, a chance to walk there who wouldn't necessarily walk to City Hall. So I'm going to go for Herm Williams.
Councillor Parkinson.
So my notes were that option 1 looked like the preferable way to go, and Meadow Park looked like the place to go, and yet I'm not going to give Councillor Baxter credit for this, but I think I'm leaning now more towards Herm Williams, and I would suggest if we do choose Herm Williams that somebody should just talk to the Hatley Park Centre about using that for parking, in the evenings, and then maybe putting up a little whatever they call those lighted signboards to say you could park here and walk there, and that might shave off a lot of the problems. Put handicapped and disabled parking next to the park, and others could walk a block. So I'm gonna go with Herm Williams.
Any other takers? So were you specifically looking for a place tonight, or do you want us to send you away and sort of say, put a matrix together and just say, this is what I recommend?
If council would prefer that, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I did notice upon review that the motion didn't really include a location. So I'm willing to, how do you want to handle that? We can add to it, we can append to it. I see Cynthia's waving over here, maybe she has an idea.
Sorry, I can't get my button to stay on. It keeps flashing off. I'm going to propose a motion, and if you don't agree with me, then you can vote it down and propose a different motion. But I'm going to propose that we direct that this year's event take place at Herm Williams Park, and I make that by way of a motion, and that after the event, we evaluate how it went, what the issues were, and decide perhaps next year it will be at a different park. That it doesn't always have to be at the same park, because every year it's going to get bigger and better since this is phase 1. So my motion would be that we hold this year's event at Herm Williams Park and make a decision on future events at a future time.
Point of order, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
so-
Yes.
The, we already have something. on
Yeah,
the
so
table,
I was
believe.
just going to help by withdrawing my motion, the original motion. Does that help, or does that further complicate matters?
Can we do a friendly amendment?
I will propose that my motion be an amendment to your motion and
Sounds-
add my motion to yours.
Can we take them seriously instead? One motion, then the next?
Yes, you do have a motion on the table to proceed with phase one, so an amendment would be in order, and that could be voted on to incorporate what Councillor Day has proposed.
Nice and easy. I'm just going to call the question on the amendment and then go to the original motion. Is that? Oh, yes, sorry. Can I get a second? Okay, Councillor Parkinson on the amendment. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the amendment? Okay, that's unanimous.
Oh, look at that. What's going on?
Now, I'll call the question on the original recommendation. All in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item, 7.4, invitation to participate in BC's Old Growth Strategic Review. And I would like to invite Jill Collinson, our senior planner, to the podium to introduce the item. Jill.
Your Worship, councils, councillors. So the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development are inviting Colwood to participate in the Old Growth Strategic Review. So for a bit of background, in 2016, Council passed a resolution supporting protection of old growth forests. That's included as Appendix 2 to the report tonight. Other jurisdictions in the province shared the same sentiment, summarized in Appendix 3. So thus, in July of this year, the province announced the Old Growth Strategic Review and have invited municipalities to participate. If the city wishes to participate in this review, council should identify which councillor will be the representative and indicate a preference for a face-to-face or electronic meeting that is anticipated to be for December 12th, 13th, later this year.
Thank you. Any questions for Jill? Councillor Baxter.
This is a question for planner or other staff, if that's more appropriate. But my question is, since this was proposed by Colwood and Machosen together, and since Machosen as a councillor knows way more about this issue than any of us ever will, is it inappropriate if I would suggest we delegate our participation in this to that particular Machosen councillor if he so wishes? I'm directing that question at staff. I don't want to do it if it's inappropriate.
Sir, administration would be unclear whether or not they've been directly invited as well. Machosen.
I would assume they have, since they were part of it as well. Yeah.
So through your worship, terms of reference of the Old Growth Strategic Review is included as Appendix 1, and they are reaching out to local governments and communities as well as a variety of other stakeholders. I am making the assumption that our neighbors have been invited. We were forwarded the invite through AVICC, who reached out to their member municipalities. So it is up to council if they wish to choose a councillor to represent them at the table or not.
Councillor Parkinson?
Well, I was just going to suggest that I don't think we should be delegating things to members of other councils without even discussing with them or understanding what they may or may not say if we've delegated them our thoughts. I know very little about old growth forests, so I'm way out of my depth here. The only thing that I think is probably relevant to the city is, of course, the forests at Royal Roads. And I bet a little bit of money that they're specifically excluded from this study, but I don't know if that's the case or not.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. I would not like to see us delegate this to someone else. I'd like to see us participate, and there is a large group of residents on Colwood who are fiercely protective of our Royal Roads forests, and so learning more either through this and what is being protected, or through being involved with the Machosen representative, who does have tremendous knowledge in this area, I think would be very useful. So I think, we put our city's name on a resolution going forward to AVICC. So I think we should be following up on that and participating to the best of our ability. I think even if you're not an old growth forest scientist, you can appreciate old growth forests and the tremendous diversity of habitat that they provide, including in our very own Royal Roads with our Magna Carta tree. Then I would certainly think that we would want to participate and find out what's happening.
Am I assuming that you're volunteering then?
I am happy to share it with anyone else who wants to learn more, but I am also willing to bring back information to Colwood.
Councillor Baxter?
I just want to say that demonstrates our problem. Royal Roads is not old growth forest. It was logged, maybe selectively, but it's certainly been thoroughly logged. And you look at the age of the vast majority of the trees and the spread of ages, and it's not old growth. It's older, but it's not old growth.
Councillor Day?
I'm sorry, I promise not to carry on with the tete-a-tete. However, I have to disagree. I have done a lot of tours of Royal Roads, and when your trees are as old as the last major earthquake, witnessed by the branches at their crown and where they've been broken from an earthquake that took place 400, 500 years ago, I call those old growth trees.
I move we accept Councillor Day's kind offer to represent us on this file.
So you're making that motion. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Logan, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Okay, gonna call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, unanimous. There we go. Okay, item 7.5, BC Energy Step Code Process, Consultation, and Implementation. I'm going to invite Jill to get back up again to the podium to introduce the item. As I said before at the start, there was an amendment that a letter came in this afternoon. It's from the Victoria Residential Builders Association that should be considered in this presentation. You are going to address that then, Jill, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Jill.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, councillors. So, this report stems from Council's climate emergency response endorsed on September 30th earlier this year. As noted overhead, 2 of the 4 near-term accelerated actions, including provincial notification for public consultation on step code, and this report outlining the process and consultation and timelines for proposed step code implementation, are before you tonight. Note that an additional report summarizing the public consultation as well as proposed amendments to the building bylaw will be brought forth, anticipated by May 2020. The BC Energy Step Code is a provincial standard that establishes performance steps in energy efficiency for new buildings from the current BC Building Code level to net energy buildings by 2032. The province has set that goal for all new buildings, and they must be net zero energy ready by 2032, and the STEP Code provides a policy pathway to reach that goal. STEP Code will apply only to new construction, and it's organized into steps and by building type, as highlighted in the above figure. Lower steps are achieved via conventional building design with careful air sealing practices, incrementally incorporating some key elements into the design, envelope, equipment, systems, and such. Lower steps offer flexibility for how to improve efficiency through improved envelopes and upgraded ventilation systems. Upper steps are a bit trickier, and staff recommending considering a timeline for this upper step implementation following 2023. So some regional consultation has occurred, which included local builders. It's highlighted in Appendix 2 of the report, but the province does require each municipality to undertake their own. So in Colwood, the BC Energy Step Code will be a focus of upcoming public forums on climate change. The upcoming forums on climate change are also a council-endorsed action following the climate emergency response. A survey regarding the STEP Code will also be offered on our website, and the public forums and the STEP Code survey are currently under development and anticipated to be launched in early 2020. So above, you can see a timeline that staff is proposing related to implementation. So again, following this consultation period, we'll bring forth a summary report, the proposed amendments to the building bylaw for your consideration, anticipated again by May.
Thank you. Any specific questions to Jill on what she's presented? Not on the motion yet, but just on what she's presented. Councilor Parkinson.
So I think this is on what she's presenting, and also some of the stuff in here. So you're saying that you're going to be doing some community forums and some surveys, and then you'll bring a report back in May 2020. And my concern is that what we're talking about here, if we discuss it amongst call them a bunch of laymen and people concerned about the environment and we may get a desire to say, let's go to step 47 as quick as we can, and we may then have builders coming and going, that's completely impractical. So I see that the stuff you had in here, the appendix, there was a lot of discussion with builders. That seemed to make sense to me. I would worry that we would weigh sort of non-builders' desires too heavily, and I wondered if yes, the community forum on climate change discussing STEP Code is an important step, but prior perhaps to the report coming back to council, there should also be another round of discussion with builders, because frankly, I think we've all heard different stories. We have a letter in front of us tonight that says, the sky is falling, and we've all heard from others saying, well, we're just about there now anyway, so it's not a big deal, and I think we would like perhaps a little more on that subject from builder specific before finalizing a decision. So is that considered part of the process to perhaps go back to builders after the public forums and say, this is what we're hearing, what are your thoughts?
Part of the public forums, which STEP Code will be one of the themes that is undertaken at these public forums, will hope to engage builders. We will be reaching out to the building community as we would in any consultation process to ensure they're engaged. If they participate is ultimately up to them, and the timeline in which we move forward is ultimately up to you.
Councilor Day.
Thank you. In your presentation, we are talking about climate change forums that we're going to host, and I'm trying to think what the date was. I think it was 2 years ago. Mayor Hamilton and I attended the CRD's STEP Code consultations, which included both council members, builders, and there were several tours of different step code properties in Victoria and Saanich. So part of what I heard from the developers at that forum was about that really step 2 and step 3 were pretty easy, and just as you've said, step 4 and 5 were a little more tricky to attain. And other than the public consultations where members of the community are going to be there, are we doing anything with our building community to try to help them understand exactly what we're talking about? Because it seems like the letter that we've received is very concerned about the steps, when really the steps, as I see laid out in the plan, are pretty low-hanging fruit in the step code, if you will.
Through the public consultation process, we will be encouraging the building community to participate.
Okay.
Baxter.
Since we're talking about this letter now, I just want to set everybody's mind at ease about what's said in here. Casey Edge is paid to say that the sky is falling in whenever there's an extra cost. We're talking about the same organization that said that the BC building industry would go under financially when the requirement for smoke detectors was mooted. Well, we all have smoke detectors in new homes, and the building community seems to be doing really well. And I think the information in here is about as good. So, for instance, we had in this room somebody in the audience help me, the father and son team that built the Bernhardt and Son, who built the first passive house in Victoria and have built others since. They are very, very carefully count all the costs of building passive houses. Not that we're proposing passive houses, but that was cited here. And they do that because they make their living out of building houses. And their conclusion, and that conclusion is supported by experience all across this continent, is that it costs between 3 and 7% additional money to build a passive house compared to a regular house, and that's why Bernhardt and Sons is able to sell these houses. If you're building a house where the additional costs are $110,000, if that's 7% additional, then that's a $1.5 million home. That's not really relevant. And I would also point out that given that we are only talking about going to step 3 at this point, and there will be a thorough review before we go any further, as pointed out in the report, I believe, Gablecraft, who are a very successful home builder and who are selling their houses at a profit as fast as they can get to them, are building to somewhere between step code 2 and step code 3. So I think the evidence is quite contrary to everything that Mr. Casey Edge has said on behalf of the Victoria Residential Builders Association.
Thank you very much. I have a specific question for you, Jill. I mean, you know, when I came in as a counselor, this is the first time I've even heard that term, to tell you the truth. I'm very truthful with your step code, and then I heard someone else use the term built green. And then now we've got a new term, and it's called the National Building Code. Now, I guess, so my first question is that true that it is not, step code is not mandatory under the BC Building Code? Is a true statement?
That is true. It was brought in 2017 essentially as an option for municipalities to prepare them for the requirements that are going to be here for net zero, which is step 5 and beyond for 2032. So it was brought in as an option for local governments to enact to prepare themselves for what will be here by 2032.
Okay, and so is there a dummies guide so that I understand, because what I understand, there's of the 13 municipalities, 4 have adopted the step code, whereas the rest haven't made a decision, right? And what I'm trying to understand, because when I was looking at this Built Green, and they always, in their stuff, right? It's all, and you got to watch all the propaganda that every one of these documents has, and which is right and which is wrong. And I'm just sitting there going, oh, geez, I don't know, it's beyond my scope, my pay grade. But is there sort of like a comparison so that you can sort of say, this is Built Green and this is step code, and what the differences are and what the differences on home prices are? Because we talk about affordability and, all this stuff, propaganda they have in this particular, if it is propaganda, I don't know if facts or fiction, but how do we know which is which and what's true and what's not true? I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around this, to tell you the truth.
So I am not aware of a comparison between Built Green and step code off the top of my head. It's something we could research and get back to you with information on.
Okay, thank you very much, because it's going to help me, because I'm, Oh, Dennis, do you have something?
In response to your last question, we've worked quite closely with Gablecraft around their experience with step 2s and even step 3s, as Councillor Baxter points out. Their principal is also very well versed with Built Green. I think he was a past president of the association. So that was certainly somebody that we, as Jill pointed out, would be in touch with and say, can you give us some experience around the differences, and more particularly to your question, Mr. Chair, around the cost differential.
Thank you very much. So, any other questions to Jill before I put the motion on the floor? Councillor Parkinson.
Sorry, sir. I guess my question is that the motion that we're looking at calls for implementing step 2 in June of 2020, and you're talking of having some forums and coming back with a report into May. If we're a little cautious about tonight deciding we want to implement on certain dates, would there be an issue with getting the report in May and determining the dates at that time? How long would it take to say, okay, we're going to go to step 2? I mean, if we're talking about it, we're thinking about it, and we get a report in May that says, easy peasy, let's go, could we then at that point decide that June was the date, or we might decide a different date made more sense? I'm frankly a little uncomfortable tonight saying these are the dates that we will do these steps based on a report that we're not going to see for 6 months.
So ultimately, the date of implementation is up to council. As for a time frame to implement, it's a bylaw amendment to the building bylaw, so the required time for the building bylaw amendment. So I guess that would be 2 council meetings, 3 council meetings.
Okay, thank you. And on that note, Councillor Day.
So I heard you say that you're inviting the builders to the forums that you'll hold. And just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the benefits of the step code, because my understanding, the builders are here for a short time doing what they do, making their money, and then the homeowner is left with the home. So I'm most interested in ensuring that the home that the new homeowners get in Colwood is going to benefit them long term. That's my interpretation. So is there something more to it than that, or is that what you're telling us about?
Well, there's an improved efficiency with every step you go up. So we typically, with improved building efficiency, there's a direct cost savings for the owner. The other thing that I'll just highlight is that in our official community plan, we want to, there's objectives that speak to reducing emissions, and 32% of our community emissions do come from buildings. So as we move closer to net zero, we hope to see those emissions being reduced, and it would correlate, but that has yet to proven itself out, but will in time.
Okay, so on that note, I'm actually going to break this resolution into 4 parts because I think that's the comfort zone from what I can hear right now. So, the first staff recommendation was that the report titled BC Energy Step Code Process Consultation and Implementation be received. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please?
So moved.
Okay. Councillor Baxter and Councillor Logan, our Councillor Jensen as a seconder. Discussion on that particular motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, so the second one is recommendation. I need a mover and seconders that a staff incorporate the BC Energy Step Code consultation into the immediate accelerated action item of public forums on climate change.
So moved.
Okay, seconder. Got that? Sorry. Discussion on that item. Councillor Parkinson.
Oops, sorry. I would propose an amendment that we add on to the end of that and report back to council by May 2020. So the motion would be, and that staff incorporate BC Energy Step Code consultation into the immediate accelerated action item of public forums on climate change and report back to council by May 2020.
Is that okay as a friendly amendment? So,
Yes, I'm fine.
Councillor Day? Okay. Friendly amendment. Any other discussion on this item as amended or as friendly amendment? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, item 3, a little more contentious. That the BC Energy Step Code for the regular building permit process be implemented as follows. Step 2, June 2020 for all new residential and commercial buildings. And step 3 by June 2021 for all new standard Part 9 residential buildings and all new complex Part 3 wood frame residential buildings. Can I get a mover and seconder? So we can discuss. Councillor Baxter and Councillor Day second. Discussion, please. Councillor Parkinson.
Again, I would like to start this motion by saying, and that consideration be given following the May 2020 report to the BC Energy Step Code for regular building permits process be implemented, blah, blah, blah. So it's probably a very sensible timeline, but until we get the report that tells us what people say, I don't want to commit to it tonight.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think that it's implicit that if council chose to make a motion to change our motion based on that report, that we could do that. We already have that the report back to council is coming. So if there's information in that report that leads us to want to change any of these recommendations that we're making here tonight, we don't need to say, provided that we still want to do that, we can change our recommendation at that time if it's warranted. So I just think that this amendment is somewhat unnecessary.
Councillor Baxter.
I'd like to support the amendment. I think not quite sure I got the wording because Councillor Parkinson's deep basso is actually very hard for me to hear with my hearing aids. What he's actually saying, but I think what you're saying, Councillor Parkinson, is to make actual passing of those bylaws subject to the successful consultation. And the reason I support that is that consultation is not consultation if you have already made up your mind. And if we have already made up our mind and we go to the community and consult, they would be quite right in saying, well, why are you wasting our time if you've already made up your mind? Therefore, I would like to make this subject to successful consultation with the community and the builders.
Mr. Earl.
Perhaps a suggested amendment to achieve the result, rather than the word implemented as follows, targeted for implementation subject to successful consultation as follows. It allows the consultation period to disclose our intended pace, but leaves the final decision in council's hands.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I thought that's what you'd said. I support that.
So we'll have a friendly amendment. Can you reread the friendly amendment, please? I'm okay with this. It's good. Amanda, could you just reread the amendment, please? The amended motion, please?
Okay. That the BC Energy Step Code for the regular building permit process targeted for implementation subject to consultation as follows. Step number 1, step 2, June 2020 for all new residential and commercial buildings. Number 2, step 3, June 2021 for all new standard part 9 residential buildings and all new complex 3-part wood frame residential buildings.
Mover happy with that then? Okay, perfect. Gordy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess through you to staff, the implementation date of June 2020, should we agree with the all the findings and the staff report, the staff comments in the report in May, is that enough time for staff to implement the step 2 in 2020? And what type of challenges would it put on to developers in terms of meeting the expectations in June 2020 if we just considered it in May?
So I'm just going to back up on one part about consultation. So there's provincial requirements that there's a minimum 6-month window. So that 6-month window started on October 9th. So we can wrap up our required consultations by April. And so it will give staff a month to prepare a summary of consultations to report back to council and then move forward with the bylaw amendments. And so it's just a bylaw process. There's not a public hearing or anything required as part of that, so that does shorten the timeline down a bit.
So would you anticipate, through you, Mr. Chair, would you anticipate then that, I guess, notice would be given to builders to say this is coming? You all ought to ramp up in anticipation that the expectation will be we're moving to step 2 in June 2020. So they have ample notice that here's the city's expectation, as opposed to setting expectation with a month for them to gear up to implement.
With the notification to the province, that is public knowledge, and so the ones who follow the Energy Step Code webpage and information service will already be aware that we have notified that we are going to consult regarding implementation, and that 6-month window is a time frame determined by the province. So yes, I do think that that's adequate time to consult.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call the question.
Comment on it.
Okay, please.
There's one thing we haven't discussed, and I don't think it's in the report. and that's that while the builders will face increased cost, and I would point out that Regency Place was built to a similar standard, and that the houses and apartments just on Machosen Road there and Painter were also built to a similar standard, as well as, of course, Gablecraft building to that standard. So a lot of the builders were already aware. But the thing that we haven't discussed, and I think we need to think about, is there's more people with money at stake here than the builders. And I'm talking about the future residents. Some of them will be existing residents who move into these new homes. And those people will save money and have more affordable houses, even though the houses might cost a little bit more. They will have more affordable houses because they will save significant amounts on their heating bills forever, for the entire time they live there, and all of those who come after them will save that money. And I think that as well as paying heed to what the builders might say, we need to pay heed to what the future residents might say if we don't do this, for instance, and how much better off a community would be if all houses were cheaper to run, how much more money would not leave the community to go to some gas company or BC Hydro, but instead stay in the community. And yes, I recognize a lot of it would be spent at Amazon, but some of it would be spent in the community. So I'm going to say that the weight of all those future residents, which number in the thousands, almost to perhaps to the tens of thousands, I think the benefit to them far outweighs the need for the builders to step up their game a very small amount, actually, to get to level 3. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just watching time here. Councillor Davis, do you have anything further to add to what's already?
I just was going to draw your attention to page 54 of 145, or 2 of 5 of the report, in terms of what we're really asking people to do at the lower steps. And we're talking about air sealing practices and air-to-air heat exchangers being put into our buildings. So it's not hugely onerous on our developers. So I just wanted to point out what exactly we were talking about asking people to do. And it's to get more efficient homes by having better sealing practices when they're built.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? It's unanimous. And the last recommendation from staff is that staff present the upper step implementation timeline following the 2023 BC Building Code revision. Mover, Councillor Jensen, Councillor Parkinson, second. Discussion. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to bylaws. Item number 8. Okay, 8.1, I'm going to invite Dennis Carlson up to the podium to introduce the item. This is a memorandum to waive the public hearing. Basically, it's just, from what I understand, it's an administrative fix, but I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you pointed out, this bylaw is on your agenda tonight for first and second reading. And to refresh your memory, the bylaw is basically a map correction in regards to the location of Bee Creek, which in turn amends the adjacent boundaries of areas 4 and 6. Because the bylaw only involves a map correction, the applicant has requested that the public hearing be waived.
And staff recommendation is that the requirement for a public hearing regarding Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 168, CD 15 Zone Map Amendment, Pacific Landing, Bylaw number 1777, 2019 be waived.
So moved.
Okay, Councillor Logan, seconder. Councillor Jansen. Discussion. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Even though I know this is a technical issue, and therefore I can understand the argument for not holding a public hearing on the matter, I think that public confidence is always at risk when they're not invited to review an application that we're looking at. There's usually at least a few people in the community who want to be assured that nothing else has changed. So I won't be supporting the recommendation to not hold a public hearing, not because I think there's anything wrong with the suggestion, but because I want the community to be assured that everything that we do is done openly and with full scrutiny available by the public.
Any other discussion? Any other councillors? Okay, I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Days in opposition. Okay, I'll ask for a mover and seconder for first and second reading, and the recommendation is that the Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 168, CD 15, Zone Map, Pacific Landing, Bylaw number 1777, 2019, be given first and second reading. Can I get a mover and seconder for first and second reading?
So moved.
Okay. Councillor Logan, Councillor Parkinson, a seconder. Discussion.
Mr. Chair, I think to Councillor Day's point, this bylaw is very specific, and it is relative to the map only. And so I think that's the confidence that the neighborhood and the community can have, is that it is very specific on the changes. So that's why I have absolutely zero concern.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other discussion? I'll call the question. Oh, sorry.
Just prior to calling the question, can we just confirm that the motion on the table is for first reading only?
Yes, it is for first reading only. Sorry. Yeah. For some reason, I thought I can combine them, but you're right. First is introduction. Sorry. Yes, it is for first. Sorry, that's my mea culpa. Call the question on, okay, so it is for first reading only. Can I get a show of hands for those in favor? Okay, opposed? Councillor Day, opposed. Now, can I ask for a mover and seconder for second reading? Councillor Jensen moves, seconder. Councillor Logan. Discussion now. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Day opposed. Okay, item 8.2, bylaw number 1790, Cemeteries Management, final reading. I ask for a mover and seconder for final reading that bylaw number cited as Cemetery Management Bylaw number 1790, 2019 be adopted. Councillor Parkinson is moved and second by Councillor Baxter. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. 8.3, bylaw number 1789, Heritage Commission, final reading. I'm asking for mover and seconder for final reading that bylaw number 1789, cited as Heritage Commission Bylaw 1789, 2019, be adopted.
Second.
Councillor Day and Councillor Logan second. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. And where am I? 8.4? Sorry. 8.4, bylaw number 1792, main sewer, 324 Lagoon Road, first reading.
Move introduction.
Okay. Seconder? Okay. Councillor Jensen. Discussion? No discussion. That's all I need, right? I don't. Can I get a mover or all those in favor? Getting ahead of myself, sorry. Opposed? Unanimous. Can I get a mover and seconder for second and third reading?
Move second.
Okay. And third? Okay, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Bylaw numbers, no, I did second and third. I'm allowed to, am I?
No.
Oh, third, sorry. Sorry about that. I forgot I can combine them, right? Sorry about that. Ask for a mover and seconder for third reading on the bylaw.
Oh, move.
Okay. Councillor
Second.
Baxter, Councillor Logan, discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, 8.5, bylaw number 1793, East Sewer, 324 Lagoon Road. First, a mover and seconder for first reading.
Move introduction.
Okay, second. Okay, Councillor Baxter. Discussion? No, just all in favor? Opposed? None, unanimous. May I ask for a mover and seconder for second and third reading? Just second. Okay. Oh, I can use the same people, right? That's what it is. Okay, now I remember. Okay, Jensen and Baxter. And we'll use them for third, by the way. Discussion. Okay, call the question. All in favor? Unanimous. And third reading, same people. Discussion. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, unanimous. Okay, in camera, there was, all business was dealt with at the time. I just need someone to move adjournment. You always do, Councillor Logan. Thank you very much, ladies.